Welcome, everybody. Okay. You've just got me today, and we're going to start with a bit of trivia. I have enabled the chat, so hopefully that'll work for everybody. A little bit of, I'm going to go with footwear trivia. What is the name of the device used to measure foot size in a shoe shop? What's the name of the device used to measure foot size? Jonas, the Brannick device. Well done. Got to jot that into my notepad here to make sure I don't forget who gets prizes. Yes, the Brannick device. I'm going to continue on the footwear theme. What is the name for that little bit of plastic at the end of a shoelace? Jesse, well done. The aglet. That is correct. The aglet. Random bits of trivia there. Okay, that'll do. A couple of prizes given out already. And good to see the chat is working well. So we've only got a couple more road users to talk about, and then I'm going to give you your road safety audit and mock audit assignment and your sites, and we will be sending you out there to do a little bit of mock auditing. Thank you to those who are already starting to or have submitted their desktop assignment. You'll get feedback on those shortly, so there's a little bit of overlap there. You'll be sort of starting to be able to do that final assignment while you're still waiting on some feedback for that, but hopefully that gave you a bit of an idea, and of course happy to chat to you. I'll also, just after our little stretch break, hopefully have time to give out a few prizes for those wonderful research assignments. And I reiterate that you're a wonderful group and had some really great stuff there that I think you'll enjoy watching a few other people's videos or reading their fact sheets or listening to their podcasts or the like. Okay, let us just share my screen. Okay, and we're on to our second last of the road users, and this session is about the two-wheeled road users, so cyclists and motorcyclists. And so I'm going to start with cyclists, and I'm sure many of you are cyclists, and many of you are involved in planning, design of cycling infrastructure, which is great. And as a road safety auditor, we can certainly have input and think about the needs of cyclists. So that's what we're going to jump through. And we want to look at, we want to look at identifying requirements of cyclists or people that ride bikes, as some people like to be specific with their terminology. People that ride bikes for safe travel, source technical information regarding cycle paths, shared paths, different cycling facilities, identify common road safety audit issues for cyclists, and I'll take you, as I always do, through different examples of things that commonly pop up or incidents that have happened that you can learn from and hopefully prevent them from happening in the future. And understanding some different treatments and terminology. So we'll jump into that. It's sort of got these things to think about for safe cyclist travel. So we've got separation, clear sight lines, space to ride, a smooth surface, speed maintenance, which I'll talk a little bit more about, connectivity and information to warn, inform, guide, and the like. So just general high-level stuff there, but let's get into a little bit more detail here. And as a road safety auditor, you kind of want to think like each of the different road users. Now that can be quite easy to do if you are a regular cyclist, or if you're a motorcyclist or a truck driver, and the like. But sometimes you've got to understand a little bit more about that road user. Most people have ridden a bike in their time, and so have some ideas there, but there's certainly a lot of variety in the riders we have, and I'll talk about that a bit shortly. But you're asking yourself these things like, you know, okay, I'm going to try and travel straight through this intersection. Would I feel safe doing that? Am I feeling safe on this road? Can I see things? What if they're turning? Will they be able to see me? You know, the door's going to open in front of me. Just lots of questions like that. I mean, what are we talking about when we say cyclists or people that ride bike? And it's the road user that I find has the biggest sort of spectrum to it, in terms of we have very young people riding, we have old people riding. And the reason, I mean, we have young people and old people walking as pedestrians, certainly, but we have these extra, you know, differences for people that ride bikes, where we have the lycra-clad riders. Some people refer to them as mammals, the middle-aged men in lycra. They're out there doing their training rides. We have those. We have sort of cargo bikes and people, you know, doing their shopping, commuting. We have, you know, these sorts where we have 8 to 80-year-olds, recreational or commuting, and you know, it becomes a little bit challenging to design infrastructure for this big spectrum. But we want to think about the 8-year-old and the 80-year-old is a little good tip. And generally, if we're catering for those road users, we're catering for the bulk of people riding bikes, and we will encourage more riding, which is good, and we want that. It won't necessarily cater for the training cyclist, though, and we might just need to think a little bit differently about that. Okay, there is quite a lot of guidance out there for assessing infrastructure for safety of people who ride bikes. There's also a lot of design guidance for cycling infrastructure, which is great. So we've got a lot of information that we can look at as road safety auditors. But do remember that it is that look from a general common sense safety perspective. We're not tied to different standards and guidelines. We're just looking at, will this be safe in our opinion? But in terms of undertaking these road safety audits with thinking about cyclists, we've got stuff in the Austroads Guide Part 6, which deals with cycling, but in the prompt lists at the end, you'll see there's good sections on walking and cycling with lots of good questions to prompt your thinking as a road safety auditor. It's also covered in the New Zealand 2013 document. There's this document which not many people know about. It is available. It's a shared path audit guidelines. It was a Victorian government document. I do like it. I think it's a little dated now, but it's generally good practice. And so if you are undertaking that road safety audit on a shared path, it's a good document to have a look at. You do get good information in these documents as well, but that's a nice little document. I'll talk to you a little bit about shared path road safety audits at the end of this session. Now then, you've got some New Zealand documents available on cycling infrastructure. There's lots of them out there. I've put a few here. I've put lots into your resource folder in this course, so you can delve into it. And I just sort of scraping the surface of stuff that's out there. The Crow manual, though, is generally considered the Bible of design guidance, infrastructure design guidance. It's from the Netherlands. So if you want to get a copy of that, that's some pretty amazing stuff. And there's lots of different sort of documents popping up here and there with different prompt list documents. out of the States, and we've got more. Oh, we've got the UK document and others. So lots of stuff available to you. But let's jump into some immediate things that you might find as a road safety auditor. The first one I want to pop up is the idea of longitudinal grades. Now, it's a very specific one, but for me, it's sort of that one that typifies an issue which is almost exclusively for cyclists. Wheelchairs, yes, it can be an issue, although they're not usually travelling along that travel path that a cyclist would be going. Now, I've done a number of expert witness legal cases where longitudinal grates have been in the road network or in the path of a cyclist, and they've dropped into them and come off and been seriously injured. And sort of in those cases, I really just say, well, when we get to the component of the road safety audit course where we talk about what to look for when undertaking a road safety audit for cyclists, the first example we use is a longitudinal grade because it's so obvious when you've got an eye out for safety for cyclists in particular. I wouldn't say it's the biggest, it's definitely not the biggest cause of serious injury or fatality for people that ride bikes, but it is a very obvious issue. So we have many different grate types available, cyclist-friendly grates, and they're stock standard now. But you do see this sort of redundant in the road network. So there's a lot of, I suppose, legacy of this. And we see this in areas like car parks a lot. And as we become more, pushing active transport, as we should be doing, we sometimes are directing cyclists through areas where there are these longitudinal grates. And that was one particular case which was quite interesting. It was a big shopping centre. Their car park was full of these grates with big openings in the middle of the running lanes. They sort of drained in, and they were doing some expansion works and doing a really big sort of bike parking facility associated with it. And they'd sort of set this bike route that they wanted all the bikes to come off the shared path, and they made a little connection and they drew them into that. Well, they drew them into that and then straight down this bit of their sort of car park to the storage facility, which was, this bit was just littered with these big longitudinal grates. So that's, I suppose, another example where road safety auditing can assist. You'd kind of hope somebody in the development and design of that may have made that connection, but a road safety auditor should hopefully come in with those clean, clear set of eyes and have a look at that. But certainly that shopping centre development was, held liable to the injuries of the parties. And I'm just unfortunate that, with these incidents that happen, we want to get them done early. So cyclist-friendly grates, or ideally not having the grates and doing other drainage systems. But that's one. Another one that I suppose it comes up a bit. I certainly wouldn't think, again, that this is a big source of death or serious injury for cyclists. But again, it's stuff that auditors can be picking up. So here we've got a road which is signalised intersection, T intersection, and the signal phasing has cars go out and cars come in at the same time. And so the cars are going out, yeah. So the left turn arrow comes on. But the project is to put a bike storage box at the front of those signals. So they're putting all these bike painting, bike storage boxes, doing other bits and pieces. So the result of that is that simply the cyclists will filter up here and then store there, and they're trying to get a nice clean run. But we're going to have this issue where a vehicle's coming up, they want to turn left, there's cyclists storing that want to go straight, and there'll be this issue. Now, this it's certainly an issue, and you point it out, and it gets rectified. But it's one where I sort of scratch my head about how you risk rate that. It's highly unlikely that somebody will, miss that cyclist and plow straight into the back of them, where they've managed to see the green arrow but on the cyclist. I mean, that to me isn't really a possibility. More likely is we'd have, some cyclists there, and then the vehicle would make, moves to go around them, and that may be more of an issue. There could be something there. Hard to risk rate, but easy to rectify. And it's stuff that when the designer sort of designed this, they really didn't do that. Look at how do the signals phase and how does that operate? They just sort of were plonking in their cycle facilities as they go. So the audit team was able to inject that thinking. Okay, this one is going to be for you to find a few issues and type them into the chat. So I'm going to pop up a picture, and I want you to act like a road safety auditor. Now, it's existing conditions, but that's okay. You're going to look for issues that you think could present hazards for a cyclist. I'll give you a second to do that. I'll also give a prize to the person who can tell me what country this is as well. So, oh wow, I'm getting lots of stuff coming in. This is good. Okay, let's have a look. I've got to get my little notepad here to give out some prizes. Okay, so Margie gets the prize for saying it's Wales. And then what do we got here? Well, Jojo's, I'm putting that down. Jojo's been the first one to point out the longitudinal grate. So well done, because I just talked to you about it, didn't I? And pointed it out, and I wanted to make sure you were spotting those. Interestingly, this one is correctly orientated, if you are going to use one of these old school ones, for a bike that's on the road, but straight across the bike facility that runs as a longitudinal grate. So there you go, keen eyes, well done. And what else are we seeing here? Some really good, some good stuff here. We've got a number of people talking about the fence and it blocking sight lines. We've got, yeah, good. Lots of people picking up the stormwater grate, the like, and the fence. People talking about the tactile pavers and the like. Lack of grab rails, the broken curbing, and yeah, some other good stuff. Good. No road markings. So this is good. You're seeing lots of things out of it, and it's giving me confidence. You're all starting to, really hone your eye as road safety auditors for issues. Admittedly, you're looking at the existing conditions, not designs, but that's okay. So let's have a talk about a few of those. So longitudinal grade, yeah, excellent. I mean, that can just be simply replaced with a cyclist friendly. We've got this sort of straight run through for the bike path, and then we've got a concern where we've got we don't have sight distance here because of this fence. Now, somebody has then gone, well, cyclists don't have priority across here, so they should stop, get off their bike, have a look, and then cross the road and put their cyclist dismount sign. Now, this is just a little bit of maybe a engineering thing, is that if I see that sign, I know they've got an issue and they have not fixed it. Okay, like it is to me one of the most useless signs we have out there. the best part of this sign is it teaches you a little bit of Welsh. The thing is that there is a fundamental issue there, and putting up that sign does not alleviate that issue. It might make a traffic engineer in a Welsh council office feel that they've done something, but the reality is we're really not there, because people do not do that. And there's actually some really good studies showing that really everybody ignores that sign. So we're talking about, instead of that, we want to do things like open up the sight lines, cut the fence like that, bring the fence back if you can. Potentially even, or why don't we give this bike facility, which looks pretty awesome, priority? Raise it across here. Okay, lessening the risk there. You'd still probably want to open up your sight lines. I was doing some different sight triangle calculations for priority shared paths like this, and you still do want to open up those sight lines, but you're significantly reducing the risk if you don't do that. Or ways that we could better encourage cyclists to slow down. So you can do raised paths on the cycleway. We don't anymore recommend, and this is interesting, we don't anymore recommend those fences where we, force the cyclist to go through these narrow bits around like that. It's not really from a safety perspective. I mean, that does its job. It's from a connectivity, cyclist friendly perspective, getting prams through there, getting wheelchairs through there, and these sorts of things, and you squeeze things up. But the idea is reasonable. But I mean, the absolute, classics you see here is this sort of stuff where you go, are we doing anything with these cyclist dismount signs? Are we just wasting signage and resources, and it's just laughable. And unfortunately, it's not been doctored. It's actually out there. So, as road safety auditors, your job is to be realistic. Your job is to be, as I say, realistic. Think about, are people going to get off their bike? Are they going to really slow down? Are there just better ways we can do this? And document that and report it. So here's an interesting one, and this actually is a bit of a case study beyond just the cycling infrastructure. But this was a road safety audit I was involved in. It was a while back now, and the team, we were asked to do well, it was sort of pre-opening / post-opening. I mean, it was open, so we'll call it a post-opening road safety audit, just built. Big new subdivision, really, really big subdivision. And part of their design, they had put in a shared user path. But they put it right up where the footpath would usually go. And so they created it as a shared path. Now, as a result of that, we identified that there are a number of fences, and we're just talking about fences blocking sight lines, that were full height, right up there, and then the garages of new houses were located there. So we're going to have cars backing out or coming out and popping out into this spot where we've got cyclists, chugging along there. So that's been pointed out here as the issue. Then the recommendation talks about some cut down fences. So you open up sight lines which are easily available, and ideally they would have left some good separation between this shared path and that end. So there are those sight lines. Now it's all built and it's all a bit too late, but we sort of had to put some ideas and recommendations in there. So Sebastian's asking a really good question there around private fencing and what the what abilities there are for councils or road controlling authorities to be able to alter these things. And this is exactly where this sort of ended up going, which was we handed in our road safety audit report, and this was one of the findings of it. And the client, the receiver of the road safety audit report, being a local controlling authority, said, well, okay, thank you for the work and your thinking, and we like, and agree with everything, except for we would like you to remove this finding. Can we remove that because of these reasons? First of all, we have approved this subdivision in its in the way it's been designed from those perspectives. The high fences on these particular blocks sit within the structure plan or structure guidelines specific to this area, and we're not allowed to alter private property fences. So please remove that from your audit. And this is I suppose why I wanted to use it as a bit of a case study, because I can appreciate the challenge that they find themselves in. However, that's not our issue or concern as road safety auditors. We've identified something that could be an issue that could cause death, serious injury, or injury to road users or path users in this case, and we are obligated to report that, regardless of whether it's going to be easy to fix or not. And so then we have this conundrum of, boy, it's a challenge that comes up a bit as road safety auditors, where your client, the person paying for the audit, is also the one receiving the audit, and they very much do not like what you're saying, because it's going to cause them a lot of headaches, and you're in this this very awkward battle. And that's where I suppose you need to sort of stick to your integrity and the purpose of road safety auditing and being that independent voice, and accept sometimes maybe you won't get more work from that client. Anyway, so we stuck to our guns on that. It caused them some trouble. They ended up going in negotiating with the individuals, paying for the rectification of the fences and some removing panels and some alterations and changing their subdivision design guidelines and the like. And we may have saved some incidents into the future, and they won't build it more of these, which is great, and they've rectified these ones. And so that's a win to a road safety auditor. Not that it's a competition, but we're actually seeing action from us identifying this issue. Never got another audit from that group, but that's all right. Yeah, so it's a good question there that John's asked, is why did we decide it was a high risk? And there was a bit of debate around this. And do I actually have, because this was the old way of documenting audits. We're slightly different now. We use a slightly different risk matrix. In fact, it's probably one of the reasons we updated our risk matrix in the Austroads guidance, because pretty much anything involving a vulnerable road user, so a pedestrian or cyclist, came out as, at a minimum, high risk. It was just the way that the risk matrix was set up, because they gave some specific examples of what sort of severity would constitute high risk for vulnerable road users. It was pretty much anything. And so we had a low likelihood on this happening, and then we had the sort of minimum severity for vulnerable road users, which did result in high risk. So we've changed that a little bit in the updated guidance. I wondered whether we would still end up on high risk, or it might come in at a medium risk because we have that extra granularity with the risk matrix under the 2022 version of the Austroads guidance. We did have it, think about it within tolerable energy. So sort of thinking about maybe a cyclist coming up here at 20 kilometers an hour. 20 kilometers an hour is moving along, quite fast on a shared user path. It's probably about what in fact it is what you tend to use to calculate sightline for shared user path priority crossing. So how fast are the cyclists coming in? You need to know that in order to work out sight triangles, and you use that 20 kilometers per hour as a good gauge. So that's within our tolerable energy for that vehicle to back out and for the cyclist to strike that vehicle pretty much straight on, and that should be okay. You then get yourself into these challenging situations where you imagine a small child riding home from school or the like, and the car being a large car and backing out, and the child being caught under it, which is we do see those sorts of incidents occasionally. And then you've got to sort of try and balance up this understanding of risk, because we've got sort of infinite scenarios of crashes that we could sort of delve through here, and you've got to make a reasonable judgment call on that. So I hope that sort of explains a little bit about how the risk rating was thought about here, but you've got to do that sort of thinking every time. Okay, I'm just going to keep moving on, but I hope that was got you thinking a little bit. Of course, surface issues. Now, you may be looking at road upgrade projects and the like, where they're changing things, and you can look at the existing pits and different drainage structures and the like, and say, well, are we going to be fixing these, upgrading these, moving these? Or are we still going to have them and a cyclist going to be destabilized when they come across them? Or are they going to ride out of appropriate areas to avoid this sort of stuff? So thinking not only about that destabilizing, but also does it change travel paths for cyclists? Another one that's always interesting, and this happens a fair bit, or I see this pop up in audits a bit, where you're getting a new, again, subdivision or some sort of development leg off a existing T intersection, and for one reason or another, they can't line it up. And you can see here, if you've got the through lane here, it lines up with the footpath, doesn't it? And we've got this through lane lines up with that lane. And it's not an uncommon thing that will be occurring, and you may see it in design plans. People often sort of, well, on CAD these days, they just draw straight lines, or but sometimes used to look down a plan to sort of see how things line up. And you see auditors, doing that all the time to just get that feel for it. But what's going to happen there is we're going to see sideswipe crashes in there, and that's going to be quite common. They are very minor for passenger vehicles. But what happens when the cyclist is going along there and they're caught up in this? That's just the higher severity for that vulnerable road user. So first of all, at design stage, we want to be lining up our lanes, getting all of that worked out. In these sort of existing scenarios, it becomes a enhanced delineation, lane guidance, the use of which they have in this scenario, RPMs. So you can see that the dots there, they're RPMs as opposed to RRPMs. So somebody, actually, I'll give a prize out on haven't given a prize out for a bit. What would RPM stand for in this context? RPM. Jesse's on it again. Raised pavement marker, and Robin close followed behind. Yeah, so raised pavement marker. They're a dome-shaped marker just to do exactly what I'm talking about. But you've got to place them obviously so that they're right in the right spot, so vehicles going that way aren't going to be confused by them. Our RPMs are raised reflective pavement markers. You don't use those in these scenarios, but anyway, that's what it's like. So interesting look at the bike facility and what happens. We have a bike lane as such, and then it drops off for the intersection. And unfortunately, that's not uncommon. In fact, it is sort of put into the different Austroads documents as an option for intersections. It's just to drop off cycle facility and essentially let cyclists fend for themselves amongst the traffic. We really would be, questioning that in situations where we're on strategic cycling corridors, we're trying to encourage cyclists and these sorts of things. And some potential options there are things like protected intersections where, the cyclists get their own facility through there in one way or another. They can be very expensive, this sort of stuff. You can give cyclists space or head starts and a few other options. Again, another little one is just as a cyclist sort of comes up here and then gets squeezed out. So we have a stand-up lane, which essentially is, you get that extra lane at the intersection. We call it a stand-up lane. And then the vehicle coming out of here is, where are they looking? They're looking back for their ability to merge. So we've just got this point where cyclists are not, drivers are looking away from where the potential conflict point is, which is not a great scenario. So you can do things like signal head starts, the bikes get nice and out early, or the like, or thinking again about those facilities to protect cyclists through the intersection or, exiting. It becomes very hard, but often, but these are, again, things that can be pointed out. So roundabouts have always been a challenge for people that ride bikes. Now, there's pretty good evidence in research around increased risk for people that ride bikes when roundabouts are there. There's actually not good evidence for the same around pedestrians. People commonly talk about roundabouts being dangerous for pedestrians, but I'm not aware of evidence to show that. I'm aware of some evidence to show that they actually appear to be safer for pedestrians. Now, I do admit, though, that they have a serious permeability challenge, and they inhibit walking and the like. So we certainly don't. So we want to provide those facilities, but just from a pure safety perspective, we're not seeing roundabouts pop up significantly for pedestrians, but for cyclists, they do. Now, some of the research, I'm skeptical that they've looked at the exposure correctly in the sense that I think the pedestrians are not crossing there and they're crossing at other locations and not being picked up, but that's an aside. And that's exactly what Jesse's put in there to say that, yes. So you could have we should have a bit more look into it, but there's some good facilities you can use anyway. So this used to be pretty much how Austroads would tell you to design a roundabout to cater for cyclists on a single lane, local road style environment, which was to push your cyclists as far out as possible. All right, get them away from those vehicles using the circulating carriageway. it was really interesting then because I'll come back to that. What we saw was still a lot of bike crashes, and two modes of bike crash happening really. One involved this vehicle coming through and the cyclist and some sort of collision there. The second one was a vehicle that would enter in front of the cyclist, and cyclists would hit or would hit the cyclist, and they failed to see the cyclist, even though they sort of looked directly at the cyclist. And you know, the behavioural psychologists have a field day with this one, and I think anybody who's done a safe system assessment course, I think I repeat this sort of information, but the look but failed to see phenomenon is what it's called. It occurs for cyclists and motorcyclists, particularly at roundabouts, where the driver approaches from, you know, the bottom here, the rider's coming in here, and they look directly at them, fail to process that information and strike the rider. It's the behavioural psychologists have a field day with this, because they go into all sorts of different ways of analysing that. They talk about threat theory, you know, that the brain doesn't process it as quickly because it's not a threat to you personally. They talk about saturation numbers. I can't remember the exact term they use, but once you get to a certain number of cyclists on your network, then they're more front of mind. You're quicker to process it. There's also some discussion about where the bike riders are, lane positioning, and that became a really interesting one. And Ostrodes had a good delve into that, and sort of discovered that they sitting them out here enhances the ability to miss that by drivers entering. It also opens up that opportunity for that squeezing through and clipping and trying to overtake the cyclist at this point and along. So the suggestion was to alter it to more something like this. And so New Zealand example there, and you can see the use of these symbols and an encouragement of cyclists to quote, claim the lane, as it's termed in Ostrodes now. Claim the lane, get that central position, stop that squeezing, be more visible. Anybody know what that symbol is actually called? And oh, there we go. And the only issue I've got here is it's Grant. Well done, Grant. I couldn't quite see all of your name on my screen, so I'm just writing that down. It is a sharrow. It is a sharrow, and it's sort of a shared arrow is the mashing together of words. So it's indicating an area of the road network where drivers and riders will share the same road space, and that we should be looking out there. As a road safety auditor, you know, I look at this and I sort of understand and know of that research and the theory behind it, and think, okay, that's good. Yeah, I still would like to see us providing separated facilities, because really to ask your 8-year-old to claim the lane is a big ask. I do also love designs though where they put sort of a speed cushion back here at some point, and the cyclist then has this point where the vehicles significantly slow down to navigate this point, and the cyclists are able to sort of step in front, because it becomes like an awkward merge point at that time with a faster vehicle compared to the cyclists, and it's a bit messy. So that to me is a really sort of elegant design when it's done right. 2-lane roundabouts, just extremely hard to cater for cyclists. And you know, if you talk to the Dutch, well, as soon as you're at 2-lane roundabout, it's grade 7 for cyclists. Your cyclists are going to go under, actually the roundabout usually goes over, because they don't like to make people that ride bikes have to go down and then up. They say, well, no, the ones that have motors, they can do that. The cyclists get a flat run through. But, Australia and New Zealand, we're often, constrained for one reason or another. Usually it's the funding to be able to do this. And we have more and more people on bikes trying to use two-lane roundabouts, which becomes pretty challenging. There are sort of different ways to look at it. You could look at things like pedestrian cyclist priority on legs where you have single lanes. Technically, you could look at that on multiple lanes. And I'm just, again, doing some work trying to look at pedestrian cyclist priority on multi-legs, which are not signalised. And you really want to create a splitter island in between two open sight lines. And there is one example in New Zealand of that, and I can't exactly remember where it is, but if somebody can remind me, I've got, the depths of an archive somewhere, a picture of it. There's another one, there's a few others I've got from Australia, which are decent examples. But at the least, creating good points for cyclists to pause, to wait for their gap to cross and pause. And as I say, I mean, the Netherlands would just have you go under that. That would all be an underpass. But the sort of best practice in terms of a single lane roundabout for pedestrians and cyclists are these what we call protected roundabouts, and I think we will see an explosion of these across Australia and New Zealand in the next decade because they have been built now, they have been evaluated, they're performing really well. There's understanding now about the function of our road network to be more than just moving cars, and that we are utilising these as active transport corridors, and we're okay to potentially slow vehicles in some specific areas down a bit and provide priority by the road users. And they work really well. I mean, a cyclist wanting to turn right sort of comes in here, goes around, and off they go. They've got their own sort of way to do that, or they can continue through. So there's this one built, Moray Street. Happy to provide people with sort of video footage of riding through it and walking around it and things like that. Some 360-degree footage as well, if you're interested, if you're planning to construct one, or if you're auditing one, to have a look at features and what sort of tweaks and design tweaks work well, don't work well. Really performing well. Courageous local government authority that popped this in as the first one in sort of Australia and New Zealand. And the reason is that it was known that it's going to slow vehicles down through there, okay? But they were pretty okay with that and had some great standard letters to send back to people suggesting that they walk or ride their bike where they possibly can, which I thought was very courageous and good, but a lot of, aligns with all of their strategic commitments. So well done. It is a neat design in the sense that, a vehicle you can prop one vehicle out of the circulating carriageway to keep at least some vehicle movement going along through there. We did a bit of an evaluation of this in terms of, it wasn't a crash-based evaluation because, you can't do crash-based evaluations on one site. You don't get any statistical significance whatsoever. But what you can do is sort of conflict analysis, video it, watch, understand, and it performs pretty well. Somewhere around 75% of cyclists utilising the facility, and the others are still just using the roundabout as they do, and yeah, working quite well. And people still playing around with and trying to think about how to do this for two-lane roundabouts and what can be done. I'll pop this one up for a couple of reasons, but as a road safety auditor, you got to think, okay, are we providing facilities for cyclists? But are they going to impact on other road users? Are we going to create risk for others? Are we going to create risk for the cyclists by trying to cater for them that we need to think about and providing that independent lens? So this is an interesting sort of one where they would, the design idea was to create this little pocket there. The designer, one of my colleagues, one of our designers, refers to it as the mammal pouch, because the cyclists using this route are predominantly the lycra-clad middle-aged men in lycra, and the idea was that for anybody who's turning right, they can ride up and then prop here and wait for their gap and then continue on through there. But as an auditor, you just sort of look at that and you again put that common sense lens on it. And first of all, say, well, is the pack of riders going to use that? No, they're not. They're not. There's not enough storage for all of them. This is sort of the one rider will use it. And the second one, you start to think about vehicles coming out of here, larger vehicles, swept path of vehicles. Are we going to have vulnerable road users storing there and larger vehicles coming around here and their trailers and things sweeping over these areas, and some other challenges there. So, lots of thinking to be done as road safety auditor and lots of input that you can have. So cycling facility, well, it's sort of a shoulder cycling facility, and this is the design. So this is good because this is kind of stuff you'd be looking at and you'd be saying, okay, so we've got that, and then it goes up and there's a dedicated sort of bike facility along here for riders, and that's nice. Get them out of the circulating carriageway, get them a bit of space, and they can go through. It's going to be a challenge to turn right, but we won't deal with that in this one. And this is good. And what do we got here? Some interesting signage. Bike lane ends, and then bike only. Okay, this is interesting. You get there on the ground, and then once they've built it, you have it sort of having a look at it. Think, okay, as a cyclist, as somebody riding up to this, what are you going to sort of think? And, to me, I look at it and I go, well, I kind of think that my facility ends here. And it's time to get in and battle it out with the cars and the trucks. And a little bike only symbol up there. And I think we might miss that potentially, or it's really not that obvious. And it's interesting because this was purpose built for the bikes, yet to me, it almost will do the opposite. It's going to create that, bikes pushing into that area. So some simple little alterations to this, and thinking about it at design stage, or even potentially at post-opening, as this one was, would, to use some green, just connecting those two. That would very quickly highlight that is where cyclists should go. That's not the traditional use of green paint, okay? Green paint was and is generally used for a conflict point between a passenger vehicle and a bike, okay? So it is to warn the driver that a cyclist could come to this bit of the road. However, it's starting more and more to be used as a little bit of a guidance device to say, hey, bikes, go this way. And here's an example of where it's certainly being used in that sense, is saying, hey, bikes, we want you to go down here to get onto this shared path. And so guiding from that way. And I'm okay with that. I think that's a neat way to do it if we've got a safer facility and a good point for a cyclist to go to guide them that way. Pop your questions or comments in. I'm sort of running through a whole lot of stuff. I certainly do love bike infrastructure, and I'm an avid rider of bikes myself, so get into this. Dooring, a term that's really unfortunately risen its head in the last 10-15 years, and then that's the act of a door opening in front of a cyclist, and the cyclist either striking the door or avoiding the door and going into fast traffic. Most of the death we see associated with dooring is secondary impacts, where the rider hits the door, comes off, and is then struck by vehicles in the lane next to them. We do have a good amount of serious injuries. I'd say a lot of serious injuries, not a good thing, very bad thing, of serious injuries of cyclists hitting the doors, so that actual impact, but the highest severity incidents involve the other vehicles. Really hard thing for us to treat a lot of the time. However, we are getting better. I'll jump past that one. So when you have permanent parking, often, you know, the cycle lane there presents that exact danger we're talking about. If we are able to, you know, swap that around, we see significant advantages. So this is Christchurch there, as many of you will know, and you can see the Copenhagen style bike facilities, which is where we run the bikes curbside, and we have the parking closer to the running lane. The advantages of this, well, there's many advantages to this, and we see less dooring and a few other good elements to it. As a road safety auditor, if you're auditing these designs, though, you come across some interesting stuff. I mean, your job is not to comment on all the wonderful things. I mean, you can, nice introductory paragraph if you want to talk about, you know, the advantages and how this is going to be a good thing. But your job is to find potential crashes that could happen as a result of building this. And what we see is sight lines being blocked for vehicles coming in and leaving and turning across cyclists. We see minor sort of operational issues, and whether you put this in your audit or not is up to you, mostly not road safety audit issues, but vehicles, where do they, you know, unload their pram, or if they're delivering all the, you know, drinks to this place and they're loading things back and forth, trip hazards, drainage. There's a lot of just thinking to go into these facilities. But in general, they do provide a pretty great safety outcome for people that ride by. So I'm just reading a comment here. Do we get peds crossing? Yeah, pedestrians certainly do cross in these areas to their cars and can use the crossings as well. Occasionally, and I've got some photos certainly of this, we have them used as parking facilities and taxi ranks. If you provide particularly wide ones, you're going to have vehicles park in there. They or store in there. So that's a challenge to work through. Again, these things from a road safety audit perspective, you might be putting them in like as to notes, which you can do in an audit. You know, you say, well, I can't make a clear line to a crash, which is going to, you know, cause injury, serious injury or death to anybody, but it's going to really be a real not a great situation from a user perspective or the like. You can put them in as to notes. And I talked a little bit there about shared path crossings and giving the priority of a shared path, priority to that shared path. And what you're essentially doing is creating an intersection where that path acts like a road and it is the priority road. So you will put these giveways to the vehicles. Now, you really want to be raising these because there's some you know, just wonderful benefits all around for that, slowing the vehicles and the like. We've got some different signage these days, and you know, check with your local signage exactly how you would sign these, but these are something that is being looked at, and you can see the sort of way that they come about. Now, sight lines, important one. How thinking about providing drivers enough sight distance to be able to stop because they don't have priority. So essentially safe intersection sight distance, these locations. And that's what, you know, the rider will see, and they get that clear priority. Now, as a road safety auditor, and this is a classic example. I do have a video of this, but I don't trust my ability to stream that through. But as you're riding this wonderful shared path, you go through this priority, you go through the next one that has priority, and then the third one you hit doesn't have priority, but it kind of draws you along. It's an old rail trail, and it's still got the rail lines embedded in the pavement, so it even gives that effect. Now, the point of that to me is to ride your context if you're auditing these facilities, and same principles apply for you know, roads as well. And Ferg talked about that. You know, driving that context, understanding the next curve, the back. What are you tying into? How's that going to link? How's it going to change driver rider perception? And thinking holistically about that. Another little example here, and it might be something again that you might recommend, but we use local area traffic management devices to slow vehicles in local areas, obviously. And one is a one-way slow point or a squeeze point like this, where only one vehicle can fit through. Now, if you are thinking along the lines of cyclist safety, if you provide that one-way slow point and you squeeze cyclists through there as well, that can be just added challenge. And a lot of local area traffic management schemes that we undertake road safety audits on, we're looking at and going, well, they're really good at slowing vehicles down. However, we're really going to be pushing cyclists into these squeeze points, and that happens on chicanes, a lot of the, you know, the roundabouts, one-way slow points, and the like. So if you can provide these bypass facilities for cyclists, I mean, we're providing just a wonderful facility here where the cyclist is not squeezed in, doesn't get caught up in that mess, but the vehicles have to slow down and give way to each other and work that out, and it works really well. So I mentioned the shared path guidelines. We'll take our stretch break in a minute. Now, the shared path audit guidelines, something you can have a look at. The same audit sort of steps and principles apply, but you really ride, you got to get out there and ride these ones. And that can be just wonderful. I mean, as I mentioned, I like to ride, and a colleague and I, we just love getting out there and doing the shared path audits. Because, you know, you kit yourself up, you put your dash camera on your bike, and you film it, and you know, I on my back there is one of the electronic levels, just to check what steep some of these drops are in and out, and you know, checking heights of structures and things like that. You can do, you need to do as well. And you ride it, and you cross roads, and you look at those, and it's a really nice way to think about cyclist safety from the saddle. Listed some common safety issues there, a lot of probably obvious stuff, different obstacles, widths of paths, heights of things that you're going under, surface conditions. Intersections are interesting. I mean, intersections, you kind of go back to the basic first principles of intersections, where you want clear priorities with sight lines, advanced warning, sign guidance, ideally 90-degree intersections, and reduce speed if that's appropriate. I mean, they're pretty good intersection 101 principles for vehicles as well, if you're going to look into it. This one here is probably a good example. Little just random tip. We use these apps, which are like, I don't know, this one's like $10 or something for the app, but it just geotags your photo, which, I mean, my old photos are geotagged on your phone these days anyway, but it geotags it, it gives the location of it, the direction, and gives you date and time of it, and you can jot a note in there while you're out there, and it just works for me, a treat, because I get all those photos and I just go, hit the button and they just go, and they drop onto a map exactly where they are. And then I've got the whole shared path mapped with the issues that we picked up along the way, and the and my little note to it. You can sort of grab that and plonk it in as a finding, and it's just a nice, easy one to present a really nice audit. What is the app? What a great question. So the one that I use is, and I'm just looking at it now, it's called Context Cam, CONTEXTCAM. And there's another one that people use called, I think it's Solocator, Solocator, SOLOCATOR. Does a similar thing. So have a look at those if you want. I'm sure there's like heaps of them out there, but you can have a look at those. Okay, let's jump through a few more. Yeah, I mean, more path priority sort of challenges where you don't, it's like a Y intersection on the road network, isn't it? I mean, who's got priority here? Not very clear. You could have incidents. So actually that one technically has priority, but it's kind of with the path it changes. It's a little bit interesting. Drop-offs, of course, an issue, and there's some good guidance around in the different documents about acceptable or drop-offs. But again, go common sense at it. Hey, would you be worried about that? If somebody was walking down here with their dog and the dog jumps out at the bike rider, or a kid or a pram, shared paths are quite chaotic places, they can be. So it might be obvious, but you may need to avoid and end up in that, or these sorts of drop-offs, or even hazards close-ish to the path we don't like. Different obstructions within the path, and at night these things can really disappear, and so you want to significantly highlight those. Debris on the path and the like, I think those are fairly obvious. Fencing, thinking about riders catching the pedal or a handlebar, and so we want to use specifically designed fencing. And there are really great fencing guidelines and specific fences to get approved. So again, look at your local fencing guidelines. You'll see pretty obviously when you're riding along fences that you go, well, I don't want to go anywhere near that. You don't want to go near these, but it's better. It's better. And often we have shared paths close to roads, and there's good road safety thinking in terms of separating using barrier systems. Unfortunately, the back of a lot of our W-beam systems present significant snagging hazards for path users, and so thinking about how to manage that. Again, another one where we've seen some local authority, road controlling authorities in Australia be successfully sued for riders and joggers and the like hitting the back of the W-beam systems and seriously injuring themselves. So something to think about. Options include back-to-back systems. I mean, there's now like wonderful back-to-back W-beam, flexible W-beam systems available, or your old standard G4 or Type B systems like this one can be done. So it's available, or creating more space. There's some post caps available, plastic post caps and things. Again, we don't tend to like to do this if we can avoid it on shared paths, but if you are going to have to do it, you really want to put retroreflective tape on it, so at night people can see it. The chain's not going to be a good thing. Somebody's probably tied this there to warn other riders of this night and the like. So yeah, just thinking about that. I think this is a good setup. I think they've done well here. I mean, the cable stay, which is holding, a power pole. Ideally, we don't have that in the middle of the path. However, from what they've done, they've clearly delineated it. They've got retro-reflective. They've got flexible posts. These are the ones that will collapse. They've line marked that. I think they've put highlighting and a little bit of protection on the actual hazard. I think, all things considered, I think they've done a decent job here with the situation they had. So I sort of ran through that at the end. We did a little fact sheet on these thematic audits, and these actually now have made it into the 2022 version of the Austrates guide. But we had these done quite a while. We've had these for a while. I put the originals into your learning management system, not on your USB. They're in a learning management system. And so you can have a look at this. It just gives a little bit of the guidance that I'm sort of talking about. So if you are doing one, you can have a flick through that shared path audit guidelines, and you're good to go. We won't do that quiz because I'm just going to catch up on a bit of time shortly. But I do want to give you a 3-minute stretch break. So 3 minutes, have a stretch, fill your coffee up. Pop any questions in as you go, but we're just going to get back into it fairly quickly, and we're going to talk about motorcyclists when we come back. Okay, we'll get back into it. And John's asked a really good question and has obviously some good knowledge around how barrier systems operate, because he's asked about that deflection area we need behind a barrier system, and whether it's appropriate or not to have road users in that area. And that's often an area of debate, and you would need to weigh that up as a road safety auditor. Certainly, if you have the space available, absolutely, you work out your dynamic deflection of the barrier system, which is documented in the technical conditions of use of each barrier system, and you understand then how much it would deflect on impact, and you provide that as a buffer area between the barrier and the path. Now, in most situations, you don't have that space, and so what you're doing is trying to, I suppose, protect road users from that vehicle that would leave the road and run a bit along the path. The actual barrier system strikes are very quick. They hit and they deflect and then they're out, okay? And so it would, have to be exact timing to get that, and we protect a very big area associated with the shared use path from that barrier system. It's not ideal. So what I tend to do is in designing this sort of stuff is I would tighten on my post spacing to make the barrier deflect as little as possible, potentially look at a more rigid barrier system to try to have less than that. But I will, in the end, sort of accept that risk if I can't provide that adequate dynamic deflection. You wouldn't worry about working with. So working with is dynamic deflection plus a roll allowance. So essentially, if this is the barrier, we go, when a vehicle strikes a barrier, the barrier moves. And then if it's a large vehicle, it rotates. We call that a roll allowance. So you'd actually, your dynamic deflection, you're working with is dynamic deflection plus roll allowance. I wouldn't worry about roll allowance just due to the fact of, I suppose you could think about roll allowance. You're getting into some intricacies there. Let's see what we've got here. I was putting up on back W beam schedules paths risks of being trapped by the barrier. But yeah, so that's right. If you've got hazards, so say trees, then shared use path, then road, okay? If you put barrier at the back of the shared use path, okay, as an auditor, that to me, the concern is that the vehicle leaves the road, right, hits the barrier and runs along the shared use path, finding any pedestrian or cyclist along that, okay? So we could potentially be increasing the risk a little bit for the path users. We're decreasing the risk for the vehicle occupants because they're not hitting a tree, they're hitting a barrier and they're running along it, so that's good. But if you can push that to curbside and provide that protection, it's a better scenario for everybody. Yeah, good question. Okay, I better keep moving on because I need to give you your. So I'm going to have to email out winners of prizes because I don't have time to go through that. We're going to talk about. Oh, that's not where I want to be. That's where I want to be. We're going to talk about motorcyclists now. And I will move quickly through this. I apologize, but I'm going to give you some info. There's a bit of overlap between motorcyclists and cyclists in some of the thinking, but certainly riders have unique needs and are often a forgotten road user in our thinking. Now, you've got some wonderful New Zealand people for motorcycle safety. You've got many people who know that. Robin's in this course, Robin Gardner, wonderful motorcycle safety thinker, and many others. So you're in a good position for assistance, but as a road safety auditor, you need to think about this road user as well. And so I'm going to go through requirements of motorcyclists for safe travel, different technical information available, common issues, and some treatment terminology. Motorcyclists are seriously overrepresented per kilometre travelled compared to cars. We're talking 20 to 30 times more likely to be killed or seriously injured. And there's a heap of factors as to why that is. But their vulnerability and their size are certainly big ones. So immediately we have some documentation available that will help you to think about the needs of motorcyclists associated with the infrastructure, the design, the operation of the road. And Making Roads Motorcycle Friendly here, you have your New Zealand version, and that's available. Just you can Google it, Making Roads Motorcycle Friendly New Zealand. You can have a look at the other jurisdictions that have them as well. And it's a good way to gauge what are the particular things for motorcyclists that we need. And I like to talk about the 5 S's when I undertake road safety audits, thinking about motorcyclists. And the sight, surface, sign, strike, speed. So can we see riders? Can riders see what's coming up? What's the surface we provide? Are we warning, informing, and guiding using the correct signage? What is the rider going to hit when they crash? And what speeds is all happening? The risk we had as probability times consequence. And if we think back to then the 5 S's, we've got the sight, surface, and signs trying to reduce the chance of the crash happening. The strike is about how bad that crash is going to be, like in terms of the severity of it, the consequence of it. And the speed, speed's magical in road safety because it reduces the chance of the crash in the first place and the severity of the crash if it does happen. So we get double win there. And so let's just go through these very briefly. Sight. Riders are smaller even than smaller vehicles. That's obvious to you. So they can be hidden behind things. I use this as a photo of very small little sign there. You can see hiding half of a rider, and we have power poles which would also do that, trees and things. We may not consider sightline obstructions, but they are enough to hide riders. What riders can see coming up, I mean, riders are very, they make decisions about speeds and lines based on what they can see. And so when we have these blind crests, they're very reliant on our appropriate signage there. When a rider approaches a curve like this, where it tightens up, it's a particularly dangerous spot for a rider. So a rider coming in here will make a decision on the line and the speed. They go based on the radius they see, the curve radius they see. And we might provide some speed warning, but they will also be influenced by what they can see ahead. And this kind of curve that tightens up has a technical name. Actually, I'll give a prize if anybody can tell me what the technical name for that is. Ooh, tricky one. Some people call it a double radius curve, but it has a particular name which Jesse has got, compounding curve. So it's a compound curve, and yeah, not a great thing for cars. You're sort of going along and then it tightens up, and maybe there's a little bit of traction loss, but it generally cars are okay. Riders don't sort of have that correction luxury, and they end up on the wrong side of the road, or if it's the other way around, they end up in the roadside. So particularly dangerous. So these signs are available, and there's been some evaluation of them, not the best evaluation, but they are proving really quite good, at least from riders' commentary around them, in warning of these compound curves. Ideally, we wouldn't have these compound curves, but they're out there, and it costs you $1 billion to remove one, so you're going to end up having to sign them anyway. Is it in the TCD manual in New Zealand? I'll wait and see if anybody else can answer that in the chat. I don't know. I know there was interest in using them and trialing them, and I think they do a wonderful job. Here's an interesting compound curve example. 4 motorcycle run-off-road crashes to the outside of curve at this location, and it's got a 252 radius into a 117 radius, unsealed road entering here, the gravel wash there. You can see why it's a particularly dangerous location for riders. So as an auditor, you, and I'll talk to you about motorcycle audits, but you essentially would send a rider through the route ahead of a trailing vehicle of auditors, and the rider would be mic'd up and talking about what they're feeling and seeing, and they will tell you. I mean, you don't need to do ball bank indicator tests. You don't need to do sort of gypsy tracks through a touring route, because that rider will tell you that they'll go, wow, that tightened up on me, and you know that's a compound curve, and you'll probably feel it yourself in the vehicle. So when we see these sort of keep clear scenarios or the like, we have a vehicle turning in, we have a vehicle number 2 coming through there. Crashes could happen with motorcyclists being 1 or 2, but maybe have a guess in the chat. Which do you think we see more representation, over-representation of motorcyclists, 1 or 2? Any thoughts on that? Yeah, seeing a few 2s come in there, lots of 2s. Lots of 2s come in. Yeah, it is 2. I mean, motorcycles could be 1, but more often they're 2, because the driver here is sort of propping to look, and motorcycles are just more hidden behind other vehicles and different bits and pieces, so harder to see, and so then that collision can occur. What can we do about it? Well, as an auditor, you could recommend all sorts of things, from linking signals. So this is obviously queuing back from a set of signals. You could put signals here, as in, so when the queues get to a certain point, you block the motorcyclists this way. You could pull the keep clear hold line back a little bit to open up sight lines. You could, block off that if there's no need for it, and different things to do. That's actually a photo of that one I had the aerial image of. The Pajero here is having their sight lines blocked by that truck, obviously, don't they? So any rider coming through there, taking a complete guess that there's not a rider coming through there, or another car for that matter, but the cars, it's just going to be less severe, isn't it? We talked about sightline blocking. There's the rider there, just hidden behind the tree, so keep that in mind as you audit. And let's talk about the surfaces. So motorcyclists lean, and this creates a scenario where the rider is heavily reliant on the surface. Their center of gravity is out there, and any surface defect will sort of slip them out there, and we're in trouble. So motorcyclists, we talk about as the canary in the coal mine when it comes to surface deficiencies, the first to be killed. And it's more of an existing conditions look you tend to do, but if you're looking at areas and wondering whether these surface deficiencies are going to be fixed when they grade the road, you look at the design, you can think about motorcyclists and cyclists as well there. And especially where they're leaning, where they're braking into different curves. So we want those good skid resistance and consistent surfaces. But unfortunately, we see a whole lot of stuff out there in terms of challenges. So we see different depressions in the road, which can destabilize a rider, make them lose traction or lose their line that they're riding. Potholes, pavement failures. I'm just now showing roads in all sorts of disarray. But in terms of roadworks, gravel wash, mud, debris, detritus, all that stuff on the road surface makes that slippery surface, and we've got to think about riders in those situations. We think about our patching and where we're doing patching, and whether we can do full width patching across the lanes. That would be good. It would cost a little bit more, but you can see that the rider's line is directly on the connection of that patch, which may open up and break up over time. So a question there from Sebastian, which is a good one, around the inherent vulnerability of motorcyclists and whether to phase them out of the transport system. Well, gee, I could have a long chat about this. I'll make two comments. Well, first of all, if motorcyclists didn't exist and they turned up and wanted to use the road network, there is no possible way they would be allowed. Like, the risk is just way too high. But we're not in that situation. We're in a situation that they are a road user, and they are a licensed and registered road user, and thus, as road safety auditors and as road designers, we have a duty of care to do the best we can. Now, we're going to struggle to do everything to make it completely safe. However, that's the world we live in. Now, there's bigger political, things. Do you try to phase out motorcyclists? Well, it's not going to be. It's political suicide to jump on that bandwagon at the moment. But things might change, and there's lots of advantages to riding, and certainly some people can do it at lower risk. But yeah, and Robin makes a good point. There's lots of other things we do in society that come with risk. So, complicated question, and certainly one that I'm thinking we need to have a coffee or a beer and have a long chat about that sort of stuff. But they're here. I think they're here to stay, and we've just got to think: can we make it safer from what we can control in terms of the road environment? I am a licensed rider, I should say. I'm not an active rider. Yeah, good political answer. Vote Biden, Ken. Yeah, I'm a licensed rider. I'm not an active rider. But because I've selected not to due to my safety concerns. But yeah, anyway, let's keep ticking along. I'm sure others would like to weigh in on that. I'll let that happen. Still talking about surface issues, and just interestingly, on those curves where a rider is fairly stuck to a line, if they encounter something like this, coming around a curve and there's a sight distance impediment there really is no option to go inside this. The only option they have is to go outside it, pull the bike upright and try and navigate it through it. They're really going to go on to the wrong side of the road. So that advanced warning of any of these issues is so important. Obviously, trying to fix it, not have them there is the ultimate. We use steel plates in roadwork scenarios, and they get wet. A bit of rain, bit of moisture on there becomes a very slippery surface for, well, a cyclist or a motorcyclist for that matter. Even a pedestrian, if you put it in pedestrian areas. So ideally, we don't use these because we don't have these big openings, but sometimes unavoidable. And you might look at it and go, well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? Like, you would be very careful. Well, yes, but if a rider was behind a truck, or it's raining, it's dark, and it becomes a little bit more of a challenge potentially. So there are sort of surface covers. They're kind of like skateboard grip tape that you can put onto these, and you can make them bright color to even more stand out. Try and bolt them down properly. That's a nice thing to do. But yeah, just have to think about different things in the surface. Now, as a road safety auditor, you're often auditing to the design, aren't you? Well, you can look at where surface pit lids are going to be put, and if they are in the circulating carriageway of a roundabout, or in the middle of travel lanes and things like that, you can point those out at that early design stage and see if they could be moved, which is a good time to do it. Here's one in Rotorua, which is right in the roundabout. And riders are going to be looking around and looking at a whole lot of other things. It might be an area they've got to brake quickly or avoid, and it's just not great to have it there. So, I mean, originally in the design of that, if that could have been relocated out, it would have been a much better scenario. Surface conditions, we can improve skid resistance with many different ways, water blasting, different surface treatments, and the like. And so having a think about that. Thinking about the curbing that's used, curbs, obviously drainage requirements around different curbing, but barrier curbs are, you know, easily enough to destabilize a motorcyclist. The more mountable the curbing, the better. Here is a little video actually that I'll hopefully will stream for us, which I've shown a few of you before, but I'll play it again. It's just really to show how small a lip can destabilize a bike. So you can see there a small, very small lip and destabilizes the bike, and they find the grab rail there. You can see it sort of came out of the ground. It didn't bend the metal, certainly. It just pulled the whole thing out of the ground. I think the rider's okay. But there you go. It's a very small. Now, I don't think that roundabout was designed badly, and I think, you know, they actually highlighted the lip, which was good. So that's a relatively slow environment, but I think it's, you know, quite an interesting one there. So guaranteed, if you get into road safety auditing and you do a fair bit of it, you're going to see designs or proposals which are to paint lots of stuff on the road surface. And I just want you to think about that potentially being a slip hazard. If it's a thermoplastic line marking and it gets a bit worn and it gets a bit wet, it's very slippery. We don't want to see big swathes of paint on the road surface, because it just can be that slip hazard for the rider. And lots of different signage. I don't need to go through it. Getting your signage correct is just a good thing in accordance with your different standard documentation. You can provide these warning signs directly for motorcyclists. Now, I think these are used in New Zealand, as I understand, but that's when you've got that specific hazard that a motorcyclist is far more at risk than other road users. But just general signage and warning of anything out there, motorcyclists are highly attuned to these warnings. Strike. I'm just checking how I'm going for time. I've caught up a bit because I do like to have a little bit of a chat about this strike. So first thing, this is a long time ago now, I got a graduate to look into motorcycle crashes on curves, and just they produced this diagram, which I thought was pretty cool. They did a great job, and it's kind of obvious. Outside a curve is where more motorcycle riders crash. Some do come to the inside of the curve. It's a bit closer to 50-50 for cars with their ability to overcorrect. But we want to think about the outside of curves, and especially on popular motorcycle routes like Coromandel here. You know, popular area. We've got a bit of a surface issue. We've got a curve. We've got what are these concrete block things? They're not going to be good for vehicle cars, but you know, quite a hazard for motorcyclists there. So having to think about how we treat those. We do have flexible signage available, because a galvanized steel post that we would usually call frangible, you know, breakaway on impact, is certainly strong enough to kill a motorcyclist. They hardly budge. They just kill the rider when a rider strikes them. We do see, unfortunately, quite a bit of trauma associated with riders striking normal signposts and being killed and seriously injured. So there's work happening in that space. It's very hard because you've got to cater for wind loads and all sorts of things. There are these low mount products which are quite good, but for higher signs it can be a bit challenging. Think about riders leaning as they go around curves, so how close you have your furniture and your fencing and how high you have your guttering in terms of catching foot pegs and the like. That's important stuff to think about at design stage. There's a staged photo of a rider leaning around a curve, but you can see they sort of close to that sign, just to highlight that message. We talked a little bit about barrier systems before there, but certainly barrier systems are our go-to for protecting road users from striking trees and power poles and culverts and hazards in the roadside and drop off and the like. And those are very, specifically designed products, but they're designed for cars and trucks sometimes. And motorcyclists hadn't, or in their native design, they do not consider motorcyclists safety. So we need to start to think about how we can retrofit these and make them safer. And one way to do that is using these underrun protections, because half of the motorcyclists hitting barrier systems are sliding on the ground and they hit the base of the barrier system. The other half hit the barrier system on their bike still and go over the top. So this underrun protection, and there's a heap of different products that now do it. So the generic term is underrun protection. People might call it rub rail. I mean, rub rail is a particular product, albeit a public domain product. So there's different ones. There's biker shield and motorcycle protection rail and different brand names that you can use, but they sort of create that continuity of the barrier system. So if a rider's sliding along here at 60 kilometers an hour on the ground, hitting one of those posts, definitely seriously injured, if not killed. And if we put that there, lower injury, likely not killed, likely to hit it and slide along it. Still injured, I would imagine, but a better scenario. And these have been crash tested under the Spanish, or it's the European crash test. It's this Spanish invented it, but I think I've got a video of that crash test coming up. But it can be retrofitted to existing guard fence, and oh yeah, here. So this is European crash test, and what you'll see here is the. So this is, you use a motorcycle crash test dummy, which is just a normal crash test dummy. You do minor modifications to it, and then you slide it on a sled and then let it run at 60 kilometers an hour directly at the post, and then you do one directly in between the posts. And so this one has proven that these bring the crash severity at that 60 kilometer per hour, 25-degree angle within tolerable limits, under sort of level 3 serious injury. So it's as friendly as you're going to get at a 60 kilometer per hour crash into a solid object as a motorcyclist. So we can get good benefit from that. Little tip as auditing, as auditors, and the end of a barrier system is a pretty specific engineered device. Okay, and we don't know what would happen and how that would operate if underrun protection was connected to it. Nobody's tested that, and so if you were to see, connections to that under here, that may compromise the functioning of that end terminal, which it struck, does some very specific things. So we have seen that in the past, connections all the way up of the underrun protection, which actually will create risks for other road users. So keep an eye out for that sort of stuff. Wire rope safety barriers present interesting challenges for riders, but probably not the reasons why you may have heard. So there's the riders some riders still talk about wire rope systems as the cheese cutter, and that imagining getting sliced by the wires and the like. And lots of research went into all of this and really showed that the wire rope systems don't present that cutting danger with the wires. Riders that hit these systems, if they do, they go over the top of the barrier, just as they do with any other system. The posts are the danger, sliding, hitting the posts. The actual proportion of motorcyclists killed or injured hitting wire rope safety barrier systems is absolutely tiny. And that's the reason for that is that popular motorcycle routes which have curves usually, like touring routes I'm talking about here, you cannot install wire rope systems. You physically can't do it, because if you have a curve like that and you put a wire rope safety barrier system in there, right, and you tension it up, I mean, these are the way these work is you tension them up. I mean, that is just going to, it's just going to, well, you do it. If you install a wire rope systems on a 200 radius curve and you tension it, you see your posts start to move. Like you just, anyway, 200 radius is absolute minimum anyway in the design standards and specs around wire rope systems. So they're not used on those. So that's one thing. Anyway, and then striking of the base. And they're predominantly used on those long, relatively straight routes, people falling asleep, leaving the road. Motorcyclists don't tend to fall asleep at riding the bike the way cars do. So we're in a whole lot of different scenarios. So very low amount of it. But the one thing that I suppose I agree is that we don't have a great way to retrofit a wire rope system for motorcycle safety. There are these things, different post protectors, stack cushion, and a few others that could go around them. They're not good. I mean, they've been used, I would say, as just a PR device to try and get, because people are jumping up and down about the barrier systems, and so these were used, but they've never been tested. Yeah, just basic logic says they're not going to operate well. I mean, you're trying to absorb energy rather than redirect energy along a system. They're football goalpost batting at best. So the reality now is that they used to be sort of things you had to use when we didn't have anything better, but flexible W-beam systems with underarm protection are you just go to every time. If you were ever considering putting these on there, you've gone the wrong barrier system. Anyway, I'll talk more about that to anybody who wants to go in long detail. Connect underarm protection to its bracket, not directly to the post. We saw a heap of these go out directly to the post, but you lose all of your cushioning value there, and you've got areas where a rider's leg or an arm can fit through these holes. I'll just jump through a few of these to get to where I need to go. Speed, super important, and many ways we can influence rider speed and car speed around riders as well. So simply good delineation, but do remember that these can present a strike hazard for riders. We're working on some stuff to try and make these friendlier, but it's quite a difficult engineering challenge. But yeah, so good delineation, speed advice, speed warning. I don't get worried about the idea that riders might not follow these advisory speeds. I say that they are out there to indicate the radius of the curve they're approaching. And so if they want to double them all, okay, well, that's sort of, we've provided consistent, clear advice, and consistency is key, no surprises. So if it's a 35 for this one, down the road where it's a 35, well, they know what they're going into, and that's sort of us doing our role as road designers or auditors. And I mentioned motorcycle audits. Yeah, so this is where you take that rider and the rider communicates what they're feeling, what they're seeing. Wonderful when they're a road safety auditor too, and they can, you know, really get into that. And you can have a following team in a vehicle, and you can sort of have your rider out there talking about their issues and what they're seeing and feeling. And we've got a fact sheet on that in the learning management system as well. I'm not going to do the case studies because I'm going to give you an audit to do. And sorry, I apologize. I sort of ran through that a little bit quickly, but really important for us to get to the introduction of your task. Let's go. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing the learning management system now. I'm sure you are. I think I'm in teacher mode, not student mode, but that's all right. You know this system quite well now. So we're now down all the way. We're moving into the real pointy end of this course. And so we've just finished the content of module 4. And so we've got lots of stuff in there, the slides. I've got some case study videos pre-recorded because I knew I'd run out of time. So there's more there if you want to watch it, and I talk through different case studies and different things. Smoking motorcycle. You've got a quiz to do. Won't take you long. It's fairly easy. And then we get into a few things associated with your task. So let's have a look at, well, let me explain the task. So you are going to now do a road safety audit. Now, it is a mock road safety audit, and we've trimmed bits off it, and we've changed things, but it's really getting you closer to the real process because you're going to be given a design. It's going to be near your house or your workplace or whatever address you gave us. And you're going to look at the design, and you're going to go out and look at that site. And you will probably know the area well, but you're going to look at it now with this particular thought of, okay, they're going to change this. They're going to build a roundabout, or they're going to add traffic signals here. What crashes could happen as a result of the changes that they're going to make? Not what crashes have happened in the past or what is going to happen with the existing road environment. No, in the future when they build this, what are the issues? And you're going to then report on that using the full New Zealand road safety audit template, the current one. Okay, so you're going to get a feel for how you do a real audit. Now, we're not going to make you find all of the issues. We're only going to get you to report on 3 because we want to streamline it for you. And we're not going to make you go out there at night just because we have done risk assessments on all of the stuff you're going to do. And we didn't see, we were a little concerned with that. We've chosen all the sites because they can be done safely. They're good areas for you to park if you drive there, or you can walk there. You can look at the intersection from away from standing in traffic or anything like that. You can observe they're lowish speed environments. So we filtered them out, but we don't want you going out there at night. I mean, you probably go there at night anyway all the time, but not as part of this exercise. We don't want you doing that. And we've got a safe work method statement for you to look at. We want you to have a look at it. So it's in that folder there. And then we need you to just agree to act, playing your part in acting safely during your site inspection. And so that's saying that you're not going to go out there when you're intoxicated, that you're not going, that you're going to consider your safety. You're going to wear a high visibility vest when you're out there. I think we've got some COVID protocol in there. So you're not going to, I don't know, go out there if you've got COVID or something like that. So have a look at that and agree to it and wear a high vis vest when you're out there. So then we've got into this complete your road safety audit. Oh, there's a little article on wire rope safety barriers and motorcycles for those who are interested as well. So we click on that. And what we see here is that we've got a whole lot of sites all across the country. And we've got names next to it. Sometimes there's only one name, sometimes there's more than one name. So these are individual sites for you. So let's have a look at maybe this one, Upland Road there. And so click on that, and this is, what do we got here? Always an exciting surprise. Okay, so you can see here, very simplistic designs, concept level design, early stage designs. So you don't get a lot of detail. We have purposely done this because we don't want you to have to spend, 2 weeks doing this assignment. We want you to just show that you understand this process. So this one, it looks like they're creating a new signalized intersection here and removing some crossings because they're adding new signalized crossings. And so you don't get much information. There you go, signalized intersection concept plan. Okay, so that's the kind of thing you're doing. So what you're doing is looking at that and saying, what issues, what risks could arise when they do this? And so, I don't know this area at all, and I haven't been to the site, and this is the first time I'm looking at this, but I would be saying, okay, are we going to get good sight lines to the signals? Where are they going to put the pedestals? Are these on pedestrian desire lines? Oh, it looks like this curb outstand bit now is going to remove that parking. I wonder where they're going to now park. Are they going to block areas? Is that going to block sight lines or other areas? We've changed the radius of this curve. Is that going to be problematic? Okay, we had pedestrian crossing here. How are they going to get from there to there? They're going to walk up there. What's the lighting situation? Can we see these things? And the list goes on. So you could use those prompt lists. It'd help you work through that. You imagine, riding your bike through here. How does that work now? Oh, I'm going to get squeezed in at this point now, aren't I? Have we thought about that? And lots to think about. So you will find issues. You won't have all the information you would like, but you'll have some information. And remember, you're auditing the design, not what's there at the moment. If what's there at the moment is going to stay with the design and be an issue, you'd still report that. But then you get the audit template, and I had opened that one before, but let's open it again. So then you download the Word document template, and anything that's yellow, you fill in. Okay, anything that's highlighted yellow, bright or light yellow. And so let's have a look here. You've got some stuff that's not highlighted, so you don't need to do anything because these are standard words in the New Zealand template. You just leave them there. Have a read of them if you want. It just talks about the audit process, what it is. Now you're going to put your name in there, okay? And if you see another name for your site and you go, I know them, I want to work with them, check with them, you can do an audit together. We're okay with that, okay? In fact, we love auditing in teams, but we really want you to be working together on that. But if you do that, you have to put both team members' names in here, okay? I don't want to see 2 identical audit reports by one people. I want to see it as a team report. You both submit it through the learning management system, but yeah. So then we want you to fill out your site inspection, had your pre-audit meeting. This is it now. It's not really a pre-audit meeting because you'd be asking lots of questions about the design and why you're doing this and what's happening here and how you're doing this and the like. But for our mock exercise, this is it. You got your risk matrix there. Now, scope of the audit. You just put a little bit of information about what they're doing, okay? What this design is. Now, in a real one, you'd flesh this out a lot longer, but we just want a little capture of that. If you've got numbers on your drawings, put it in there, who designed it, what number it was. Some of them might not, because we had one of our designers just design something in your area. for quite a few of them, but sometimes we use real ones when we could get our hands on them. So if you have those, put those in there. A bit of description about the project, where it is. It's probably longer than you need to in that example, but and then you're into your findings. Now you've practiced this already from the assignment you've hopefully just finished or you're about to finish, and you'll get some feedback on it. But we want you to continue this now with ones that you find, and you're going to look at the site and you're going to do exactly the same. And we only want you to do 3. 1, 2, oh yeah, 1, 2, 3. There they are. Then the final thing you do is you sign it, because this is a formal document, and we want you to practice that process of signing it off. And the last thing we want is a photo of you on the site in a high-vis vest. That's the only photo we want. In a real audit, you'd put lots of photos of the different approaches and different issues and all of that. Just one. Prove to us that you went to the site, because it is an important part of auditing to go to the site, get a feel for it, and we want you to do that. Question would be, when is it due? Is a good question, and I'll just have a look at this. It'll be in there, and you'll have a good 2 weeks on this, I think, because we've got a session in a week's time where you can bring any questions if you want, and it is due the 31st. So you've got a bit of time to do it. I'll jump onto it quickly because you can get in contact with me. We can have a little meeting if you want, if you're struggling, or you can come to the next session, ask your questions, and we can go through those. Right. Any final questions? We've just ticked on to the hour. You've probably got other meetings. All right. So you'll get some feedback on that audit on your desktop one shortly. Find the site. If the site doesn't suit you, if you go, I moved since I gave that address, or actually I want to do that one, it's closer, just let us know. We're very accommodating of that. Thank you. Good luck.